Millionaire CEO thought he had no children until little girl approached him and asked for a ride home. Before going into the video, please leave us a like and a subscribe so we have the motivation to make the next videos. Logan Carter had spent years believing that he was in complete control of his life. Every decision was calculated, every move intentional, and nothing ever happened without his approval. He had built his reputation on precision, on never being caught off guard, on knowing every possible outcome before it even unfolded. But all of that changed the moment a little girl with familiar blue eyes looked up at him and asked, "Can you take me home?" At first, it was just an odd request from a child he had never met, a lost girl looking for help, nothing more. But as he stared into those strikingly familiar blue eyes, a chill ran through him. His breath caught in his chest as a terrifying realization settled over him like a cold shadow. She wasn't just a lost child. She was his daughter, and he had never known she existed. That evening had started like any other. Logan had just finished a business dinner at one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, where he had closed a deal that would add millions to his company's growing empire. Stepping out into the crisp night air, he barely paid attention to the city lights reflecting off his black Maybach, the luxury vehicle he had bought more for practicality than for status. He was reaching into his pocket for his car keys when he heard a small voice behind him. "Excuse me, mister?" Logan turned, expecting to see a server or a valet. Instead, he found himself looking down at a little girl, no more than 7 years old. She stood there alone, her delicate features framed by thick, dark brown curls. But it was her eyes that made him freeze. Bright blue, piercing, the same intense color he saw every morning in his own reflection. His pulse quickened. Something about the way she looked at him, like she knew him, made his stomach twist in a way it never had before. The girl hesitated, shifting her weight slightly before speaking again. "Can you give me a ride home?" Logan blinked, momentarily unsure if he had heard her correctly. A child alone at night asking a stranger for a ride? Yeah, missy. It didn't make sense. Instinctively, he scanned the area, expecting to see a frantic parent running toward them. But the street was quiet. "Where are your parents?" he asked, his voice coming out sharper than he intended. The girl lowered her head slightly, her small fingers twisting into the hem of her coat. "My mom isn't home," she said softly. "And I don't know my dad." A cold sensation settled in Logan's stomach. He cleared his throat, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who brought you here?" She looked up at him again, her blue eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. "My nanny, but she left. I didn't know what to do, so I waited." Logan exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. None of this was making sense. "What's your name?" "Lily," she answered. The name sounded soft and innocent, but it did nothing to quiet the unease creeping up his spine. He looked at her again, taking in every detail. The dark brown hair, the slight curve of her nose, the delicate structure of her face, and those eyes. His eyes. Logan forced himself to push the thought aside. Coincidence, that's all it was. "Where do you live?" he asked. Lily gave him an address. Logan recognized it instantly. Not a wealthy neighborhood, but safe. That didn't explain why a child had been left alone outside a high-end restaurant, waiting for a stranger. He took a slow breath. He could walk away. This wasn't his problem. But something about the way Lily was looking at him, with quiet trust, with expectation, made it impossible to ignore her Vaughn. He sighed. "All right, I'll take you home." Lily's face lit up with relief, as if she had never doubted that he would say yes. That unsettled him even more. As he helped her into the passenger seat, fastening her seatbelt, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his chest. There were too many questions, too many things that didn't add up. And as he pulled away from the curb, glancing at the little girl sitting beside him, he had no idea that this moment was about to change his life forever. The car ride was quiet at first. Lily sat in the passenger seat, her small hands resting in her lap, her legs barely reaching the edge of the seat. She didn't fidget, didn't shift uncomfortably like most children would. She just sat there, composed, as if riding in a stranger's car was the most natural thing in the world. Logan tightened his grip on the steering wheel as he navigated through the city streets. He had never been particularly good with kids, never had a reason to be. He wasn't the type to soften his tone or adjust his pace for anyone, let alone a 7-year-old girl. But there was something about her that kept his mind racing, a feeling he couldn't quite place. "You shouldn't talk to strangers, you know," he finally said, keeping his eyes on the road. Lily turned her head slightly, watching him with those piercing blue eyes. "I know. Then why did you ask me for a ride?" She hesitated, her little fingers gripping the hem of her coat. "Because you look safe." Safe. Logan almost laughed at that. Safe wasn't exactly a word most people would use to describe him. Ruthless? Yes. Intimidating? Absolutely. Efficient? Always. But safe? That was something new. "Did your mom ever tell you not to get into cars with strangers?" "Yes." "Then why did you do it?" She tilted her head as if the answer should have been obvious. "Because you're not really a stranger." A strange chill ran down Logan's spine. He turned back to the road, focusing on the address she had given him. It wasn't far now. He needed to drop her off, make sure she got home safely, and then put this whole bizarre encounter behind him. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And when they finally pulled up in front of a small, modest house in a quiet neighborhood, Logan cut the engine and turned to look at her. "This is your home?" Lily nodded. For the first time, she looked hesitant. "What's wrong?" he asked. She bit her lip. "Mom doesn't like visitors." That didn't sit well with him. "You think she'll be mad? You asked me for a ride?" She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "Maybe." Logan Carter had built his empire in absolute control. Every decision in his life had been deliberate, every risk carefully measured, every move calculated 10 steps ahead. He had spent years perfecting his image. Ruthless, untouchable, unshakable. His wealth, power, and influence had been his armor, shielding him from the unpredictable chaos of human emotions, from the messiness of attachment. Love, family, those were distractions. That's what he had told himself. But now he wasn't so sure. Because she existed, Lily, a little girl with his eyes, sitting in the passenger seat of his car, completely unaware that she had just torn his carefully constructed world apart. For as long as he could remember, Logan had lived by a simple philosophy: control or be controlled. He had learned it the hard way, growing up in a household where weakness was never an option. His father, a man who valued power above all else, had drilled into him that emotions made men vulnerable. That attachment was a liability. So Logan had done exactly what was expected. He had shut himself off, focused on building something no one could take away from him. By 36, he had everything he had ever wanted: money, status, an empire with his name stamped across skyscrapers, deals that made headlines, influence that turned boardrooms silent when he spoke. And yet, sitting in his luxury car, driving through the city streets with a little girl who had just wrecked everything he thought he knew, Logan felt something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. Panic. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to have a daughter. Logan tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his mind racing. Rachel, the name surfaced before he could stop it. It had been years since he had last seen her. Years since she had walked out of his life, without a word, without an explanation. He had convinced himself that it was for the best, that she had left because she couldn't handle his ambition, because she had wanted something he wasn't willing to give: a normal life, a home, love. But now, for the first time, a new, terrifying thought crept into his mind. Had she left because of this? Because of Lily? Had she been pregnant when she walked away? Had she known that he never wanted attachments, so she hadn't even bothered telling him? Logan's stomach twisted. No, that wasn't possible. He would have known. He would have figured it out, right? The memory of Rachel burned into his mind, her fiery defiance, the way she had challenged him like no one else ever had, the way she had loved him, fiercely despite all his walls, and the way she had left, without a trace, without a goodbye. He had told himself he didn't care, that she was just another chapter in his past, a mistake. But now, staring at the little girl in the passenger seat, Logan felt his world unravel. Because if she was his, if Rachel had left to protect their daughter from him, then everything he believed about himself was a lie. "Mr. Logan?" Lily's voice pulled him from his spiraling thoughts. He glanced at her, struggling to keep his expression neutral. "Yeah? Are you okay?" No, he wasn't okay. He was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into a future he hadn't planned for, hadn't prepared for. He wasn't supposed to be someone's father. He wasn't supposed to be responsible for a child. And yet, here she was. Here she was. Logan exhaled, forcing his hands to loosen on the steering wheel. Yeah, kid. I'm fine. She didn't look convinced. You look like you saw a ghost, she said matter-of-factly, studying him with the same piercing gaze he saw in the mirror every morning. Logan let out a breathless chuckle. Maybe I did, because that's exactly how it felt. Like he had been visited by a ghost from a past he thought was buried. A ghost with bright blue eyes and his DNA. As the house came into view, Logan felt an unfamiliar sensation settle over him. Doubt. He had never doubted himself before, never second-guessed a decision. But now he was questioning everything. He pulled the car to a stop, his mind buzzing with 1,000 thoughts. Would Rachel be there? Would she open the door and confirm his worst fear? Would she lie? Or worse, would she tell him the truth? Logan swallowed hard, pushing back the gnawing sense of unease. For years, he had believed he was in control, that nothing could shake him. But Lily's existence changed all of that, because no matter how powerful he was, no matter how much money or influence he had, he couldn't control this. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do next. Lily unbuckled her seatbelt, then hesitated. She looked up at him with those impossible blue eyes. Will I see you again? Logan froze. She was asking a simple question, but the weight behind it crushed him, because he knew deep down that he couldn't walk away from this, from her. No matter how much easier it would be, no matter how much it scared him. This wasn't business. This was real. And for once in his life, he had no exit strategy. So he did something he never did, something he wasn't used to. He spoke from his heart. I don't know, kid, he said quietly, but deep inside, he knew the answer. He knew he wasn't going to let this go. He wasn't going to pretend she didn't exist. Because the moment he looked into Lily's eyes, his life stopped being about control. And for the first time, it became about something real, something worth fighting for. If you believe Logan deserves a second chance, leave a comment below to support him. Would you fight for the truth if you were in his place? Like this video if you believe that no child should grow up without knowing the truth. Subscribe for more powerful stories, because sometimes the moments we never expect are the ones that change us forever. Logan Carter had always thought he was prepared for anything. He had spent years perfecting his ability to anticipate the unexpected, to ensure that nothing caught him off guard. In the boardroom, he could see problems before they even surfaced, dismantle opposition with a few sharp words, and negotiate multi-million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But nothing had prepared him for the moment. The front door swung open and he saw her. Rachel, the woman he had once loved. The woman who had left him without a word. The breath whooshed out of Logan's lungs, as if the universe had just delivered a punch to his gut. For a moment, he couldn't move. He couldn't think. The air between them felt suffocating, heavy with the weight of a past he had spent years trying to forget. Rachel's eyes widened in shock, flickering between Logan and the small girl standing beside him. He didn't need a DNA test. He knew. The proof was standing right there. Dark curls, delicate features, and those blue eyes that matched his own reflection. His daughter. His daughter. Rachel's face paled, her fingers tightening around the doorframe, as if she needed something to hold on to. Logan, she whispered, her voice barely audible. That voice. It had been years, but he still recognized the way it curled around his name, the way it sent a sharp ache straight through his chest. Lily shifted beside him, looking up at Rachel with confusion. Mom's in? She asked softly. Rachel blinked, her entire body stiffening as she looked down at her daughter. Their daughter. Logan felt something inside him snap. His voice, when he finally spoke, was cold, controlled. But there was anger simmering beneath the surface, a quiet storm ready to unleash at any second. You want to explain this? Rachel swallowed hard, but before she could answer, Lily spoke up. Mom, this is Mr. Logan, she said, her voice innocent, oblivious to the way the air had turned electric around them. He gave me a ride home. Rachel's eyes darted back to Logan, panic flashing across her face. You brought her here? Logan's jaw clenched. She was standing outside a restaurant, alone. Rachel's breath hitched. She turned to Lily. Alone? What happened to your nanny? Lily's expression shifted, guilt flashing across her small features. She left, she admitted quietly. I didn't know what to do. Rachel closed her eyes for a brief second, her shoulders rising and falling with a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was something raw in her gaze. Lily, sweetheart, go inside. I need to talk to Mr. Logan. Lily hesitated, looking between them. But now, Lily, Rachel said, her voice firm but gentle. Lily frowned but nodded, stepping inside the house. As she disappeared around the corner, Rachel exhaled slowly and turned back to Logan. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Logan took a step forward, his voice sharp and demanding. Did you ever plan on telling me? Rachel flinched, her gaze dropping to the floor. Logan, don't, he cut in, his voice dangerously low. Don't make excuses. Don't try to spin this into something it's not. Did you ever plan on telling me I had a daughter? Rachel's lips parted, but no words came out, because they both knew the truth. She hadn't. She had made a choice that had robbed him of 4 years of his daughter's life. And he had a right to be angry. His hands curled into fists at his sides. How long were you going to keep this secret? Until she turned 18? Until she got married? Or were you just never going to tell me at all? Rachel lifted her chin, but her voice trembled when she spoke. I didn't know I was pregnant when I left, Logan. He stilled. Rachel swallowed hard, wrapping her arms around herself. By the time I found out, I thought it was too late. You had made it clear that your work was your priority. That family wasn't something you wanted. Logan's stomach twisted. You don't get to make that decision for me. Rachel's eyes flashed with something sharp. I didn't think I had a choice. Logan took another step forward, his voice low and dangerous. You had a choice, Rachel. You just didn't trust me enough to make the right one. She exhaled shakily. I was scared, Logan. He let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head. Yeah, well, so am I. Rachel's expression softened, and for the first time, she really looked at him. She saw the anger, the betrayal, but she also saw the deeper emotion buried beneath it, the loss. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. Logan stared at her, his heart pounding. But you did. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. And then, a soft voice interrupted. Mr. Logan? Both of them turned to see Lily standing in the doorway, peeking out cautiously. She looked between them, her small brow furrowing. Are you mad at my mom? Logan felt his chest tighten, because how could he explain this to her? How could he tell this innocent little girl that he had missed everything? That he should have been there for her first steps, her first words, her birthdays? How could he tell her that he had been robbed of knowing her? But none of that was Lily's fault. None of that mattered right now. So he forced himself to breathe, forced himself to soften the rage burning inside him, and he crouched down, meeting her wide blue eyes. No, Lily, he said gently, I'm not mad at your mom. She studied him, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Then slowly she nodded. Rachel exhaled, something fragile in her expression. Logan stood up, his gaze locking with hers. We're not done talking about this. Rachel hesitated, then nodded. I know. Logan glanced at Lily once more, something inside him shifting. He had spent his entire life believing that success meant control, but he wasn't in control anymore. And for the first time, he didn't want to be, because now he had something worth fighting for, something that mattered, and he wasn't going to walk away. Not this time. Rachel Evans had always known this moment would come. She had spent 4 years preparing for it, rehearsing the words she would say if Logan Carter ever showed up at her door demanding answers. But now that he was here, standing in her living room with a storm raging in his eyes, every carefully constructed explanation fell apart. Because how do you justify stealing 4 years of a father's life? How do you look into the face of the man you once loved and tell him, I kept your daughter from you because I was afraid? Rachel had spent years convincing herself that she had done the right thing, that leaving had been the best choice, that keeping Logan away had been an act of protection, not betrayal. But as she stood there facing the consequences of her decision, she saw the truth in his expression, the anger, the hurt, the sheer disbelief. You had no right. Logan's voice was rough, controlled, but she could hear the tremor beneath it, the barely contained emotion. You had no right to decide this for me. Rachel swallowed hard. I didn't know I was pregnant when I left. Logan's jaw clenched, his blue eyes narrowing. And when you did? She hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. You thought I wouldn't want her. Logan's voice was quieter now, but no less sharp. Rachel exhaled slowly, wrapping her arms around herself. I thought, she paused, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I thought you'd feel obligated, that you'd step in because you had to, not because you wanted to. A bitter laugh escaped him. So you made the choice for me? She flinched. I made the choice for her, Logan. He shook his head, running a hand through his hair, his frustration barely contained. That's not your call, Rachel. You don't get to decide what kind of father I would have been. Rachel closed her eyes for a brief second, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. I was scared, she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. Logan's eyes softened, just for a fraction of a second, but then the steel returned. Scared of what? He demanded. Rachel looked away, because saying it out loud made it sound even worse. Of you, she whispered. Logan stilled. Rachel let out a shaky breath, forcing herself to continue. I watched you build your company, Logan. I saw how you sacrificed everything. Relationships, holidays, even sleep for your success. I told myself that if I told you about Lily, you would step in. Yes, but not because you wanted to be a father, because you felt trapped. And I never wanted her to feel like she was a burden to you. Logan let out a harsh breath. A burden? He took a step closer, his voice raw with emotion. Do you really think that low of me? Rachel shook her head quickly. No, I think highly of you, Logan. That's the problem. He blinked, caught off guard. Rachel exhaled. You don't do things halfway. When you commit to something, you give it everything. And I was afraid that if I told you, you would have stayed. Not because you wanted a family, but because you felt like you had to. And then you would have resented us for it. Logan let out a quiet, humorless laugh. So instead, you made sure I wasn't in her life at all? Rachel felt a sting behind her eyes. Had she been wrong? For years, she had convinced herself that she had done the right thing. She had loved Logan. Loved him so much that she hadn't wanted to be the reason he lost himself. She had thought she was protecting Lily from growing up with a father who might regret having her. But standing here now, watching Logan, she realized maybe she had been protecting herself too. Maybe she had been afraid of what it would mean to let him in. Maybe she had been afraid that Logan would have stayed and that it still wouldn't have been enough. But now she saw the fire in his eyes, the pain behind his anger, the way he looked toward the hallway where Lily had disappeared, aching for the years he had lost. And Rachel hated herself for it, because despite all her fears, despite all her careful justifications, she had taken away his right to choose. Logan ran a hand down his face, exhaling sharply. So what now? Rachel blinked, startled. What? You've had 4 years to make decisions without me, he said, his voice lower now, quieter. But that ends today. Her breath caught. I want to know her, Logan said, his eyes locking onto hers with unshakable determination. I want to be in her life. Rachel swallowed hard. Logan, I missed her first steps, her first words, her birthdays. I missed everything because of a choice you made. She winced. But I'm here now, he continued, his voice firm, and I'm not going anywhere. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. Could she do this? Could she open this door, let him in, risk everything she had built with Lily? Could she trust that he meant it? She searched his face, looking for hesitation, for doubt, but there was none. There was only resolve. Rachel exhaled. Slowly, carefully, she nodded. Okay. Logan didn't move. He studied her for a long moment, as if assessing whether she really meant it. Then finally he nodded. Good, and he said. A silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken emotions. Rachel looked toward the hallway where Lily had disappeared. She wasn't sure what the future would look like now. But she knew this. For the first time in 4 years, she wasn't facing it alone. For the first time in his entire life, Logan Carter felt truly powerless. He had built an empire from the ground up, fought tooth and nail to become the kind of man who was never overlooked, never doubted. In the boardroom, his word was law. A single signature, a single decision, an entire industry shifted. But here, standing on the front porch of the woman he once loved, the mother of his child, he realized that none of that mattered. Money, power, control, none of it would give him what he wanted most, a place in his daughter's life. And Rachel wasn't going to make this easy for him. Rachel had agreed to let him see Lily, but her hesitation was clear. You don't just get to walk in and demand a relationship, she had told him, arms crossed, defensive. She doesn't even know you. Logan clenched his jaw at the memory. Did she really think he didn't know that? Did she think he hadn't already played out every worst-case scenario in his head? That Lily might look at him like a stranger? That she might not want him around at all? That after 4 years without him, she might not need him? That was what scared him the most, because Logan had spent his life believing that people were only as valuable as the roles they filled. Employees could be replaced. Partnerships were temporary. But Lily? Lily was his. And no matter how much Rachel doubted him, he wasn't going to let his daughter grow up believing he didn't care. The first time he came over, Rachel was stiff, watching his every move. Lily had been cautious too. She didn't run to him, didn't call him daddy, didn't instantly trust that he was supposed to be in her world. And Logan understood, because why should she? She was 4 years old. He was just a man who had suddenly appeared in her life, claiming a title she didn't even know to give him. So Logan did the only thing he could. He showed up, again and again. At first it was small things, sitting on the floor of Rachel's living room while Lily colored, watching her carefully as she tested his presence, letting her hand him crayons, first with hesitation, then with confidence. Reading her favorite bedtime story when Rachel finally let him stay late enough, his voice uncertain at first, then steady as he saw the way her tiny hands gripped the blanket, hanging onto every word. Lily didn't call him dad right away. She didn't run to him with open arms, but she let him stay. And for Logan, that was enough. For now. One evening, about 3 weeks into their new routine, Rachel asked him if he wanted to take Lily to the park, alone. Logan hesitated, stunned. Rachel smirked at his expression. What? You scared? Yes, more than he had ever been in his entire life, because this wasn't a business deal he could negotiate, wasn't a contract he could win with logic. This was his daughter, and he had never done this before, but he forced himself to nod. Yeah, I'll take her. Lily had beamed when she found out. It was the first time she had shown real, open excitement at the idea of spending time with him. And Logan? He felt like he had won the most important battle of his life. At the park, Lily had run straight for the swings, and Logan followed, watching her with an intensity he never used for anything else. He pushed her gently, watching as her curls bounced in the wind, listening to her laugh. That sound, God, that sound. It was better than any deal he had ever closed. And then, out of nowhere, Lily turned her head slightly, looking at him over her shoulder. Higher, Daddy. Logan froze, his entire body locked up, the word reverberating in his chest like a shockwave. Daddy. She had never called him that before. Not once. He swallowed hard, blinking fast. She hadn't even realized what she'd said. It had come naturally. Like he had always been that to her. Like she had finally accepted that he was supposed to be there. He cleared his throat, forcing himself to move again, gripping the swing chains a little tighter. Hold on, kid, he murmured. I got you. Later that night, after dropping Lily off, Rachel had lingered at the door longer than usual. Logan had been about to leave when she spoke. She called you Daddy today. His chest tightened. He nodded. Yeah. Rachel exhaled, something complicated flickering in her expression. She's getting attached. Logan clenched his fists, knowing what she was really saying. She was scared. Scared that he might back out. Scared that he might decide this wasn't worth it. Scared that she was making a mistake by letting him in. He met her gaze, his voice firm. I'm not going anywhere, Rachel. She studied him, searching for cracks, looking for any sign that he wasn't telling the truth. And when she didn't find any, she nodded slowly. Okay, she said, It wasn't a grand speech, it wasn't an apology or a full confession of trust, but it was something, and Logan would take it because he wasn't fighting for her trust. He was fighting for Lily's. And he would keep fighting as long as it took. Logan knew this was only the beginning. Lily was still young, still adjusting, still figuring out where he fit into her world. Rachel was still cautious, still waiting to see if he would run the way she once feared he would. But Logan wasn't running. Not now. Not ever. Because fatherhood wasn't a choice for him anymore. It was who he was, and he would prove it to them every single day. For the first time in his life, Logan Carter had to prove he was worthy of something that couldn't be bought, negotiated, or won through sheer determination. He had spent his career proving himself to clients, to competitors, to the world. He had built a name, an empire, a reputation of power and control. People feared him, respected him, moved out of his way when he walked into a room. But none of that mattered to Lily. To her, he wasn't a billionaire, wasn't a man who could change industries with a single deal. He was just a stranger. And Logan knew deep in his bones that if he wanted to be more than that, he had to earn it. Rachel had agreed to let him visit, but the rules were clear. Don't push her, she had warned. Let her come to you. Logan had wanted to argue. How could he not push? How could he sit back and wait when every part of him was screaming that he had already lost too much time? But he swallowed his pride and nodded, because this wasn't about him. So the first time he stepped into Rachel's living room, he kept his voice even, his movements slow, his expression open. Lily was curled up on the couch, coloring in a notebook. She didn't look up when he entered. Logan hesitated, then sat on the floor instead of taking a chair. Made himself smaller, less intimidating. Rachel lingered near the doorway, arms crossed, watching. Logan waited. And then, after what felt like an eternity, Lily shifted slightly, her tiny hands gripping a crayon. She glanced at him. Do you know how to color? It was such a simple question, but it was everything. A door, barely cracked open, but open nonetheless. Logan exhaled, forcing himself to smile. I think I remember how. Lily studied him for a second, then reached into her coloring box and handed him a blue crayon. And just like that, he had his first win. The days turned into weeks, and Logan kept showing up. At first, he stayed quiet, let Lily dictate the terms of their time together. She didn't call him dad or even treat him like one. She treated him like a visitor, like someone she was still deciding on. And Logan didn't push. Instead, he let her get used to his presence. He sat with her while she colored, learned which cartoons made her laugh, memorized the way she twisted her curls around her fingers when she was thinking. He learned that she liked to build towers out of blocks, carefully stacking each one with precision and getting frustrated when they tumbled over. One day when her tower collapsed for the third time in a row, she frowned, crossing her arms. It's not working, Logan smirked. Want me to help? Lily hesitated, then nodded. It was another small victory, another moment where she let him in. So they built the tower together, brick by brick. When they finished, Lily grinned and clapped her hands. And Logan? He had never felt more proud of anything in his life. Then one evening, something changed. Rachel had left the room to take a phone call, and Logan had been sitting with Lily on the couch, reading her a bedtime story. She had been quiet, her little head leaning against the cushions. Then, without warning, she leaned against him instead. It was small, barely a movement at all. But Logan froze because it was the first time she had touched him on her own. The first time she had chosen to let him in, without prompting, without hesitation. His throat tightened, but he didn't dare move, didn't dare ruin the moment. Instead, he kept reading, his voice softer now, his heart pounding in his chest. Rachel walked back in a few minutes later and stilled in the doorway. She saw Lily against him, saw the way Logan's entire body had gone still, like he was afraid to breathe too hard. Her eyes softened just for a moment, and Logan knew that she saw it too. He was finally breaking through. One night after a long day, Lily was unusually quiet. Logan noticed immediately. What's wrong, kid? She frowned, picking at the hem of her pajama sleeve. Then she whispered, Are you going to go away? The question hit him like a punch to the gut, because of course she was scared. People left. People always left. And Logan Tayan, the man who had been absent for 4 years of her life, was now telling her he wanted to stay. She had every reason not to believe him. But Logan knelt in front of her, his voice steady, his hands gentle. "I'm not going anywhere, Lily." She studied him, her little brows furrowing, trying to see if he was lying. He let her, because she needed to see it for herself. After a long pause, she nodded. Then she turned back to her coloring book. Logan exhaled. Maybe she wasn't ready to believe it yet. But one day she would, because he was going to prove it to her every single day. Logan had never worked so hard for anything in his life. Not his business, not his success. Nothing had ever mattered more than this. And every time Lily led him a little closer, every small moment, every quiet victory, he felt something stronger than any deal he had ever closed. Because fatherhood wasn't a title he could claim. It was a role he had to earn. And he would, no matter how long it took. The phone call came on a quiet afternoon. Logan Carter had been reviewing contracts in his office, surrounded by towering glass windows and the hum of a city that never stopped moving. His days had always been dictated by schedules, deadlines, and high-stakes decisions. But when Rachel's name lit up on his phone, everything else faded. "Can you pick Lily up from preschool today?" Logan stilled. Pick her up? His heart pounded in a way that no business deal ever could. Rachel had been cautious with him, carefully monitoring every interaction, ensuring he earned his place in their daughter's life. This was the first time she was giving him something that felt normal. Trust. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll be there." The preschool was a small, colorful building tucked into a quiet neighborhood. Parents stood in clusters, chatting while they waited for their children. Logan had never felt more out of place in his life. He wasn't used to this world. He was used to towering boardrooms, fast-moving negotiations, commanding the attention of men twice his age. But here he was just a man picking up his daughter, a little girl who still wasn't sure where he fit in her life. He rubbed the back of his neck, forcing himself to stay calm. Then the doors opened, and a flood of children burst out, running to their parents with laughter and excitement. And then he saw her. Lily stepped outside, her small backpack bouncing as she scanned the crowd. Logan's breath caught. Would she look for him? Would she want him there? For a split second, doubt clawed at his chest. Maybe this was too soon. Maybe Rachel had made a mistake. Maybe. Then Lily's eyes met his, and everything changed. She froze for a heartbeat. Then a smile, pure, bright, unguarded, spread across her face. And before Logan could even process it, she ran to him. Not hesitantly, not cautiously. She ran like she had been waiting for him all day. "Daddy!" The word hit him like a physical force. Logan staggered. He barely had time to kneel before Lily crashed into him, tiny arms wrapping around his neck, holding him tight. Daddy. She had never called him that before. Not once. And now she was saying it like she had always known he was meant to be hers. Logan's throat tightened, his arms automatically circling her small frame, pulling her close. She smelled like crayons and sunshine, her curls tickling his cheek as she burrowed into his shoulder. For a moment, he couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. Because this was the moment everything changed. Logan swallowed hard, blinking fast to keep his emotions from spilling over. "Hey, kiddo," he murmured, his voice rough. "You have a good day?" Lily nodded against him, still holding on tight, like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. She had no idea that he would never let go. Not now, not ever. He stood, lifting her easily in his arms, her tiny hands still clinging to his shirt. Parents around them continued their conversations, but Logan barely heard them. The world had shrunk to just him and Lily. She had chosen him. She had called him daddy. And in that instant, Logan knew he was never going back. Not to the man he used to be. Not to a life where work mattered more than family. Not to an existence where he convinced himself that love was a distraction. Lily wasn't a distraction. She was his purpose, and he would never fail her. On the drive home, Logan kept stealing glances at the rearview mirror, watching as Lily kicked her feet happily, humming to herself. The weight of the word daddy still sat heavy in his chest, settling into a place he never knew had been empty. When they pulled up to Rachel's house, Lily bounced in her seat, looking up at him expectantly. "Can we do this again?" she asked. Logan swallowed the lump in his throat. Every single day. Every moment she had let him. Yeah, he said, his voice filled with a quiet, unshakable promise. We can. As he unbuckled her seatbelt and carried her up to the porch, Rachel opened the door, her expression unreadable. Lily twisted in Logan's arms, beaming up at her mother. Mommy, Daddy picked me up. Rachel's eyes widened slightly, flickering to Logan, but he didn't say anything. Because he didn't have to. Lily had already said it for him. Did this moment change everything for Logan? Comment below and let us know what you think. Like this video if you believe every child deserves a father who will always show up. Subscribe for more emotional and powerful stories, because sometimes the most important battles are fought with love. Rachel Evans had spent 4 years protecting herself, protecting Lily, and now with Logan standing in her doorway every single day, she wasn't sure how to feel anymore. She had spent so much time convincing herself that she had done the right thing, keeping him away, raising Lily on her own, shielding her daughter from the pain of a man who might never have been ready to be a father. But now Logan was proving her wrong, and that scared her more than anything. Rachel had expected Logan to get tired of trying. She thought he would show up for a few weeks, make some promises, then eventually drift back into the life he had built without them. But he didn't. He kept coming back. Every visit, he showed up on time. Every night, he told Lily he would see her again tomorrow. And every time he did. It wasn't just the big gestures. It was the small things that slowly started to wear down the walls Rachel had built around her heart. The way he noticed when Lily was tired, but refused to admit it. The way he cut the crust off her peanut butter sandwiches exactly how she liked them. The way he read her the same bedtime story 4 times in a row without a single complaint. One evening, Rachel stood in the hallway listening. Logan's deep voice carried through Lily's bedroom, slow and patient, as he read the final chapter of her favorite book. She peeked around the corner, watching. Lily was curled up in bed, her tiny hand resting on Logan's arm as he turned the pages, and Rachel felt something shift inside her. For the first time, she wondered, had she made a mistake? Had she spent so much time trying to protect Lily that she had stolen something precious from her? A father who was willing to be there, a father who loved her. But trust wasn't something Rachel gave away easily, especially not when she had spent years feeling like Logan had already chosen his career over them. One evening, after putting Lily to bed, Rachel stepped onto the porch, wrapping her arms around herself as she watched Logan linger by his car. Why now? She asked softly. Logan turned, caught off guard. What? Why are you doing all of this now, Logan? She pressed. Why weren't we enough before? Logan exhaled slowly, running a hand down his face. Because I was stupid. Rachel scoffed, looking away. That's not an answer. I know. Logan took a step closer. Rachel, I was so obsessed with proving myself, with building something that mattered, that I didn't see what was right in front of me. Rachel clenched her jaw. You made me feel like I was second place, she whispered. Like no matter how much I loved you, it would never be enough. Logan's chest tightened, because she was right. That's exactly how he had made her feel, and it had taken losing her to understand what that loss truly meant. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said quietly. I don't even expect you to trust me yet. But I'm not going anywhere, Rachel, not this time. Rachel met his gaze, her heart pounding. Could she believe him? Could she risk letting him back in? Not just for Lily, but for herself? She didn't know. But for the first time in years, she wanted to try. One afternoon, Rachel knocked on Logan's office door. His head snapped up in surprise, clearly not expecting to see her there. I need a favor, she said. Logan straightened, sensing the weight behind her words. Anything. Rachel hesitated. Lily has a school recital this weekend. Logan's breath caught. You want me to come? Rachel exhaled. She's going to be looking for you. The words hit Logan harder than he expected. Rachel wasn't just asking him to be there. She was giving him the chance to prove himself. I'll be there, he promised. Rachel nodded, searching his face. Don't let her down, she whispered. Logan's entire soul ached at the thought. I won't, he vowed. And for the first time, Rachel believed him. When the recital started, Logan sat in the crowd, hands clenched, eyes locked on the tiny figure standing nervously on stage. Lily searched the audience. Then she found him. A bright smile spread across her face, her whole body relaxing when she saw that he was there. Rachel, sitting beside him, saw it too. And something invited her finally let go. Maybe, just maybe, Logan was meant to be in their lives all along. Do you think Rachel should give Logan a second chance? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Like this video if you believe in second chances and the power of a father's love. Subscribe for more emotional and inspiring stories, because sometimes trust is built one small moment at a time. For years, Logan Carter had believed that success meant power. It meant being the man in the room that no one dared to question. It meant late nights in glass-walled offices, phone calls that determined the future of industries, deals so big they made headlines. He had spent his entire adult life chasing the next milestone, the next achievement, convinced that if he just worked hard enough, built high enough, earned enough, then he would feel complete. But now, sitting on the floor of Rachel's living room with a crayon in his hand, helping his 4-year-old daughter color inside the lines of a Disney princess book, he had never felt more successful in his life, and he never saw it coming. Logan used to take pride in his schedule, ruthlessly packed, impossibly efficient, every hour accounted for. Every minute used to push his company further ahead. He had missed birthdays, anniversaries, even funerals, because in his world, time was money. Now he looked at the blinking red notification on his phone, a reminder about a high-stakes negotiation scheduled for the next morning. His first instinct was to answer it, to confirm his attendance, to remind everyone that Logan Carter never missed a deal. But as he looked up, he saw Lily watching him. She wasn't saying anything, but she was waiting for him to put the phone down, for him to choose her, for once. And in that moment, Logan realized that he had spent years chasing the wrong kind of success. Because what was the point of building an empire if you had no one to share it with? Slowly, deliberately, he reached for his phone, and he turned it off. Rachel, who had been watching from the doorway, arched an eyebrow. "Did you just ignore a meeting?" she asked, arms crossed, but her voice softer than usual. Logan met her gaze. "Yeah." Rachel didn't say anything for a moment. Then she smiled, just a little, and that was when Logan knew he was doing the right thing. The next morning, Logan Carter did something he had never done before. He walked into his office, called a meeting, and quit. Not completely. He wasn't abandoning everything he had built, but he was stepping back, reprioritizing, because for years he had convinced himself that he had no choice but to be the first one in and the last one out, to put work first at all costs. But he did have a choice, and he was choosing Lily. His business partners were stunned. His assistant actually dropped her coffee. "You're stepping back?" someone asked, eyes wide. "Are you serious?" Logan exhaled. "Yeah, I am." Silence. Then his CFO, one of the few men in the company who had been there since the beginning, leaned back in his chair, studying him. "Well," he said after a moment, "it's about damn time." Logan blinked. The CFO shrugged. "You've built this company well enough to survive without you micromanaging every second of the day. And frankly, you've looked miserable for years." Logan laughed, a real, genuine, unrestrained laugh, because for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel miserable. He felt free. Logan had spent years measuring success in stock prices, in profit margins, in how many people knew his name. But now success looked like Lily's laughter echoing through the house as he chased her around the backyard, her tiny feet kicking up grass as she shrieked in delight. It looked like making pancakes on a Saturday morning, letting her stir the batter even though half of it ended up on the counter. It looked like bedtime stories and tiny arms wrapped around his neck as she mumbled, "Love you, Daddy," before falling asleep. It looked like Rachel's cautious smile growing warmer each day, like the quiet understanding that was finally replacing the resentment between them. Success wasn't about power anymore. It was about presence. And for the first time in his life, Logan was exactly where he was supposed to be. One evening, as Logan was helping Lily brush her teeth, she suddenly paused, her toothbrush still in her mouth. She looked up at him with wishing, thoughtful eyes. "Are you going to go away again?" she asked. Logan's heart stopped, because the fact that she had to ask meant she still wasn't sure. It meant she was still afraid, still waiting for him to disappear. still wondering if he was temporary. And Logan hated that. He knelt down, gently taking the toothbrush from her tiny hand, holding her gaze. "I'm never going away, Lily," he said softly. "Never." She studied him for a long time, searching his face, her little brows furrowing, trying to decide if he was telling the truth. Then slowly she nodded, and Logan knew. She finally believed him. That night, after tucking Lily in, Logan found Rachel standing in the kitchen, her arms crossed, but not in the defensive way she used to. She was just watching him, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet. "She asked me that question before," she admitted. "Are you going to go away again?" Logan swallowed hard. "Yeah," Rachel nodded. "I never knew how to answer." Logan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm sorry, Rachel." She nodded slowly. "I know." Silence stretched between them. Then softly, Rachel spoke again. "She believes you now." Logan's chest tightened. "Good," he murmured, "because I meant it." Rachel's lips quirked into a smile, a real one, and Logan knew he was finally home. Logan had spent his life believing that success meant winning, that it was something he had to fight for, take, claim as his own. But now he knew the truth. Success wasn't about money. It wasn't about power or fame or control. It was about who was waiting for you at the end of the day, who called your name with excitement when you walked through the door, who trusted you to stay even when the world was quiet, even when no one was watching. And by that definition, Logan Carter was the most successful man in the world. Do you think Logan made the right choice by stepping back from his company? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Like this video if you believe that real success isn't measured in money, but in love. Subscribe for more powerful emotional stories, because sometimes the best decisions are the ones that change your life forever. The past few months had changed everything for Logan Carter. For most of his life, he had believed that success was about power, about winning, about never being the man who got left behind. He had built his life around ambition, around control, around the idea that nothing mattered more than the empire he had created. But sitting on the couch with Lily curled up against his chest, her tiny hand resting on his shirt as she breathed softly in sleep, he realized how wrong he had been. This was what mattered. Not the boardrooms, not the deals, not the constant chase for something more. For the first time in his life, Logan wasn't chasing anything, because for the first time, he had everything he ever needed. The living room was quiet except for the soft hum of the television. The movie Lily had insisted on watching had ended an hour ago, but Logan hadn't moved. Rachel sat beside him, not tense, not guarded, but at ease. For the first time since their paths had collided again, she wasn't watching him like she was waiting for him to mess up. She was just there, a quiet presence, the way she used to be. Logan glanced down at Lily, watching the way her small fingers clutched the fabric of his shirt in her sleep, as if she knew he wasn't going anywhere. Rachel followed his gaze, a small, almost amused smile on her lips. "She won't let go of you even when she's asleep." Logan swallowed, his throat tight. "Good," he murmured. "I don't ever want her to." Rachel's smile faltered slightly, as if she wasn't sure whether to trust how much she wanted to believe that. So Logan turned to face her, his voice low but firm. "I meant it, Rachel. I'm not going anywhere." For a moment she didn't speak. Then slowly she nodded. And for Logan that meant everything. Logan had spent 4 years believing he was on the right path, that he had sacrificed relationships, time, even love, because it was the price of success. But Lily changed that. She had torn down the walls he had spent years building. She had made him see what he had been blind to all along. Because success, real success, it wasn't in the skyscrapers with his name on them. It wasn't in the bank accounts filled with numbers so high they barely seemed real. It was in the way Lily looked for him in a crowd. In the way she reached for his hand without hesitation. In the way Rachel, for the first time in years, finally believed that he was here to stay. He had almost missed it all, and that thought terrified him, because what if Rachel had never told him? What if he had spent his entire life believing he had everything, when in reality, he had nothing at all? He could have lost this. He could have lost them. And that realization made him hold Lily a little tighter, breathe in the quiet scent of her shampoo, let the warmth of her tiny body against his own remind him He was here now, and that was all that mattered. Rachel stood, stretching as she glanced at the clock. I should take her to bed. Logan hesitated. Lily whimpered slightly, shifting in his arms, as if she already knew he was about to let go. Rachel caught it too, her lips twitching in amusement. She won't be happy if she wakes up and you're not there. Logan chuckled softly. I'm starting to see that. Rachel sighed, then surprised him by sitting back down. You can put her to bed, she said, a bit quieter this time. She'll sleep better if it's you. Something stirred in Logan's chest, something deep and uncharted. This was trust. Rachel was trusting him with the most important part of her life. And for the first time since she had let him back in, he knew she wasn't waiting for him to fail. Carefully he stood, cradling Lily against his chest as he carried her to her bedroom. The nightlight cast a soft glow against the walls, illuminating the tiny bed covered in stuffed animals. Logan gently laid her down, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. Lily stirred, her lashes fluttering as she blinked sleepily up at him. You're still here, she mumbled. Logan swallowed hard. Yes, sweetheart, I'm here. Lily's lips curved into a tiny, sleepy smile. Good. Then she rolled over, hugging her stuffed bunny to her chest, and drifted back to sleep. Logan stood there for a long time watching her, memorizing the rise and fall of her breath, letting the weight of this moment, of what it meant to be trusted, to be needed, to be loved, settle deep inside his soul. Then, with a quiet exhale, he stepped out of the room, closing the door softly behind him. Rachel was waiting for him when he returned. She had made tea, placing a mug on the coffee table before curling up on the couch like old times. Logan hesitated for a moment before sitting beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Rachel let out a quiet breath. You know, I didn't think this would happen. Logan turned his head slightly. What? This. She gestured vaguely around them. You being here, being a father. Logan's chest tightened. I didn't either, he admitted, but I'm glad I was wrong. Rachel studied him for a moment, something warm and unreadable in her gaze. Then softly she smiled, and for the first time in years, Logan felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Logan Carter spent years believing he had it all, but in reality, he had spent his life chasing a version of success that left him empty. And it took a 4-year-old girl with his eyes, calling him daddy with unshakable trust, to show him what truly mattered. So let this be a lesson. Success isn't about what you build. It's about who you build it for. Money will never replace presence. Power means nothing if you have no one to share it with. Logan almost lost his chance, but he fought for it, and he won. Not with money, not with business deals, but with love. Do you think Logan deserved his second chance? What would you have done in Rachel's place? Comment below and let us know your thoughts. Like this video if you believe that no child should ever have to wonder if their parent is coming back. Subscribe to the channel for more emotional, inspiring stories, because sometimes the greatest victories are the ones fought with the heart. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that truly matters is family.